The Murdaugh family had long been the epitome of power and privilege in rural South Carolina, a name synonymous with wealth, influence, and a long tradition of legal success. In the small town of Hampton, South Carolina, the Murdaugh name carried weight. For over a century, the family had dominated the local legal scene, with patriarchs holding positions of power as solicitors, prosecutors, in the state's 14th Judicial Circuit. The Murdaughs were known for their towering legacy. Lawyers, political figures, and revered community members who had built an empire on the foundation of justice. From private estates to expansive landholdings, they were the epitome of Southern aristocracy. The family's success was built on generations of hard work, ambition, and a reputation that seemed untouchable. But in June 2021, everything changed. The unthinkable happened. On the night of June 7, 2021, Alex Murdaugh, who had long been seen as the heir to the family dynasty, became the center of a tragedy that would shatter the Murdaugh legacy forever. His wife, Maggie Murdaugh, and their youngest son, Paul Murdaugh, were found dead on the family's sprawling hunting estate known as Moselle. The discovery was nothing short of shocking. Maggie, 52, and Paul, 22, had been brutally murdered on the grounds of their home, shot multiple times at close range. The scene was chaotic, two lives lost in a violent manner, the family's future forever altered in an instant. The questions that arose from the murders were immediate and chilling. Why were Maggie and Paul killed? Who would commit such a heinous act in the very place that had been a symbol of wealth and power for generations? Alex Murdaugh's response to the deaths was equally chilling. At first, he appeared distraught, shocked and overwhelmed by the loss of his beloved wife and son. His tearful statements to the media and law enforcement portrayed a man in deep grief, unable to comprehend the loss of his closest family members. But behind the scenes, a far darker truth was beginning to unravel. What had begun as a tragedy was about to expose the cracks in the Murdaugh family's perfect facade. The crime. The Murdaugh's world was about to come crashing down as the discovery of Maggie and Paul's bodies sent shockwaves through the community. The night of the murders unfolded in a haze of confusion and horror. Maggie and Paul had been at the Moselle estate that evening, enjoying what seemed like a typical evening at home. But by nightfall, something had gone terribly wrong. Maggie and Paul were found near the family's dog kennels, lying lifeless in a pool of blood. Their bodies were riddled with gunshot wounds. Paul had been shot twice, once in the chest and once in the head, while Maggie was shot 5 times, including once in the back. Both had died on the spot, left to bleed out in the quiet stillness of the sprawling estate. Alex Murdaugh had called 911 at 10:07 p.m. that night, reporting that he had returned home to find his wife and son unresponsive. His voice was trembling as he spoke to the operator, telling them that he had found their bodies after returning from visiting his ailing father. "I need the police and an ambulance," he told the dispatcher. "My wife and child have been shot." His frantic cries for help were laced with genuine fear, but there was an odd sense of detachment in his tone, a sense that something wasn't quite adding up. Police and emergency services arrived at the scene shortly thereafter, but it was already too late. Maggie and Paul were gone, leaving Alex standing in front of the wreckage of his once perfect life. His tearful statements to the officers painted him as a man in agony, someone who had just lost everything. Yet, as investigators combed through the scene and began to piece together the details, a disturbing truth began to emerge. The investigation was just beginning, and the answers were far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. At first, the police kept an open mind. They considered all possibilities. Could it have been a robbery gone wrong? A random act of violence by an intruder? But as they began to investigate, something felt off. Alex's demeanor was strange, almost too controlled, given the horrific circumstances. Was his grief real? Or was it an act designed to distract from something far more sinister? The deeper they dug, the more the story began to unravel. The investigation. As the investigation progressed, Alex Murdaugh's carefully constructed life began to show signs of a much darker, hidden reality. What followed the discovery of the bodies was nothing short of a nightmare for the Murdaugh family. The police began their investigation, poring over every detail, re-interviewing witnesses, and trying to make sense of the circumstances surrounding the deaths. But from the outset, there were red flags. Alex's initial account of events began to falter under scrutiny. First, the timeline of his whereabouts was questioned. Where had he really been before he found his wife and son? A key piece of evidence came from Alex's cell phone records, which placed him at the scene of the crime long before he had admitted to returning home. His statements to law enforcement became more erratic. The case started to shift from one of sorrow to suspicion. Was it possible that Alex Murdaugh, a man whose wealth and power had protected him for years, could be the one behind the murders? It wasn't long before the investigation revealed a shocking truth. Alex Murdaugh's life was not what it appeared to be. Behind the polished exterior, he had been leading a double life. Financial records exposed Alex's involvement in a series of embezzlement schemes, thefts from the very law firm he had worked at, and other illegal activities. He had been involved in fraudulent activities to the tune of millions of dollars, all while living in a world of apparent affluence. The deeper the investigation went, the more Alex's lies were exposed. A web of deceit, manipulation, and financial crimes began to come to light. His addiction to drugs, the way he had been draining his family's wealth, and his reckless behavior all painted a portrait of a man on the edge. But the most shocking revelation was still to come. The authorities began to suspect that Alex Murdaugh had not only lied about the murders, but may have had a hand in them. It was the discovery of his involvement in a mysterious 2018 death that further fueled the suspicion. The death of a longtime housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, who had died under strange circumstances at the Murdaugh estate, was now under review. The question was no longer whether Alex was involved in a tragedy. It was whether Alex was responsible for the very tragedy that had ruined his life. The trial. The stage was set for a courtroom drama that would unfold with all the intensity of a high-stakes thriller, revealing the full extent of Alex Murdaugh's crimes. As the trial began, the world watched. The courtroom was packed with spectators, journalists, and true crime enthusiasts, all eager to see the unraveling of one of the most complex and disturbing cases in modern legal history. Alex Murdaugh, once the golden boy of South Carolina's legal elite, now stood accused of the cold-blooded murders of his wife and son. The trial began with the prosecution laying out its case. Alex Murdaugh had orchestrated the murders of Maggie and Paul in a desperate attempt to escape the mounting financial troubles that had been closing in on him. The prosecution argued that Alex had staged the murders to look like a botched robbery or a random attack, all while attempting to cover up the truth about his financial crimes. The defense, however, painted a different picture. They suggested that Alex was a man under duress, overwhelmed by his legal and financial problems, but not a murderer. The defense tried to maintain the image of the grieving father and husband, a man who had been betrayed by those around him, pushed into a corner by the mounting pressure. But as the trial wore on, the evidence against Alex became overwhelming. Financial records revealed the depth of his criminal activities, and witness testimony painted a damning portrait of a man capable of deception on an unimaginable scale. The prosecution brought forward text messages, phone records, and surveillance footage showing Alex's movements before and after the murders. Each piece of evidence seemed to add weight to the theory that Alex had planned the murders as part of a desperate attempt to cover up his many wrongdoings. In the end, Alex Murdaugh's own testimony would be one of the most riveting moments of the trial. Under cross-examination, his calm facade began to crack. He appeared nervous, evasive, and defensive. His attempts to maintain his innocence faltered as the evidence continued to mount. It became clear to the jury, Alex Murdaugh had not just been a victim of circumstance, he had been the architect of his own family's destruction. The jury deliberated, and after several days of tense back and forth, they returned with a verdict, guilty of double murder. The aftermath. The aftermath of the trial was felt not just in the courtroom, but across the country. The downfall of the Murdaugh family became a media sensation, a story of wealth, power, and privilege gone horribly wrong. As Alex Murdaugh was sentenced to life in prison, the media frenzy reached new heights. Documentaries, podcasts, and news specials dissected the Murdaugh family's rise and fall. People couldn't look away from the drama and intrigue surrounding the case. Alex's once glamorous life had crumbled, and now the world was left to grapple with the aftermath of a dynasty built on lies and corruption. For the families of Maggie and Paul, the pain was far from over. The murder trial had revealed the depths of Alex's betrayal, and the emotional toll on his surviving relatives was immense. The public's perception of the Murdaugh family had shifted forever, from a family of prestige and respect to one tainted by scandal, murder, and corruption. The case also raised unsettling questions about the power of privilege. How could someone with so much wealth and influence commit such heinous acts? Was Alex Murdaugh simply a product of his environment? Or was there something far darker at play? The Alex Murdaugh case left a profound mark on American culture. It was more than just a courtroom drama. It was a story of power, privilege, and the corruption that can fester behind closed doors. The Murdaugh trial captivated the nation because it exposed the dark side of a family that had long been the epitome of success. It reminded everyone that no one is immune to the destructive forces of greed, addiction, and deception. Alex Murdaugh's fall from grace became a cautionary tale, a story of a man who tried to hold onto his empire at any cost, only to watch it all come crumbling down. As his story faded from the headlines, the lessons of his life remained. The Murdaugh family story would live on as a grim reminder that no matter how high you climb, the fall from grace can be swift and unforgiving. In the end, it was the legacy of the Murdaugh name that would be truly destroyed, not by the murders themselves, but by the revelations that followed. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more true crime stories. Thanks for your time here. See you in the next story.